If I were hiring, I'd rather have someone who actually understood the product, who's done this 1,000 times before, than someone who's studied it and never implemented it before. So ultimately, it is a downside, but from a perspective of can you do the Atlassian work? Can you build the Atlassian solution? I think it doesn't matter too much.
I wanted to ask then, so we got our company, we know we don't want to do the MSP stuff. How do you actively find clients?
So I was like, why don't you just bring the functionality of the JSM forms into Jira Work Management? And he's like, oh, we have it. We just don't unlock it for every single client or every single customer on the Atlassian platform. It has to be like a manual request. It has to be an enterprise client. They don't do any kind of premium or standard. So it's very exclusive in a way.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Summer of Atlassian. Today I have Josh, and we're going to be talking about his company here and getting to know Josh a little bit better because Josh, when I put out a message on the internet if anybody wanted to come on, Josh was like, pick me. So let's get to know you, Josh, a little bit more. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I've been watching your videos for quite some time, actually, on Jira. I got into Jira years back. Just started working as a help desk. That was kind of my first exposure. Just managing tickets that came in, and the first platform I happened to use was Jira. From there, I went to work as more sysadmin work, and I've implemented Jira and Confluence with several other companies before. So just working with them, I've kind of loved the platform, what they've been doing with it, all the changes and updates they've been making. And eventually we kind of just went into the Jira work and Jira administration and started liking it even more. So now that's kind of what I do pretty much exclusively. I just work with Jira. I help different companies. I help different organizations and teams get the most out of it. That would include Confluence as well in some cases, things like OpsGenie and other tools.
Awesome. So how long then? How many years have you been in the Atlassian ecosystem? If you had to do some back
Probably
of the napkin math.
Yeah, probably close to 6 in total. Administering Jira, closer to 2 to 3.
Okay. And what's your favorite part about like the Jira environment? Like why do you feel like this is the place? Other than like, is it just pure serendipity then that you just landed on the right place at the right time?
Um, I don't think so because I've tried everything. I've tried every other platform for project management, for service, enterprise service management, things like Notion, ClickUp. I'm the kind of person which, when I look for a new tool or a new piece of software, I'll try literally everything to see what works best. I did try Jira several times, and I kind of went away from it. A lot of that was because it was a little bit too robust for my needs. But over time, once I kind of learned the platform more, once I started administering and understanding it, I felt that it was one of the only pieces of software out there that could actually do enterprise service management, that can do the development work, that can do like a personal task list with Jira Work Management. And just work with pretty much any team, any organization, anywhere, especially with their other tools, things like Confluence, Loom they just acquired, which was really cool. So just being able to jump in and pretty much do whatever you want. It's been a really cool experience, and just being able to have no limits, almost kind of like the walls are broken down within the Atlassian ecosystem. Whenever I work with a client or someone who's trying to build something unique, or something that's never really been done before, or maybe something that Jira wasn't even meant to do, a lot of times we can implement it in a really cool way. So that's kind of how I got into the Atlassian ecosystem.
Awesome. And what I was going to ask you next here is so first of all, you jump into this, you really like it compared to everything else. When do you realize like, okay, I can turn this into a business? Or when do
Uh,
you realize that this is the business I want to create?
yeah, that's a great question. I guess the first step was just being able to administer it for one person. I kind of just found someone who's had a need. I hadn't really worked with Atlassian super in depth. Like I said, I set it up for a few different companies, but totally different ball game when you're, dealing with different customers and clients that have completely different use cases. So when I kind of first got my hands on it and started to develop it for that one particular client, I just kind of noticed that, it's a really cool platform. I wonder if there's another need, another company, another client out there that needs this kind of a service, and that's kind of what led me down the rabbit hole of becoming a Jira admin and starting Grid.io.
Awesome. And then, so why don't we, now that you said Grid.io, why don't we give us some insight on what was the inspiration for Grid?
Grid, I don't know. It just kind of came to me. The name itself, thought it was kind of cool, quick, easy to remember. It actually started out, I kind of initially wanted to be more in the MSP space, providing just managed IT services. Um, it's probably not the direction I wanted to go, and I'm thankful I didn't really go down that rabbit hole either. There's a lot of things, a lot of competition, a lot more things you have to consider when in that space. And it wasn't just something I was like truly passionate about. Whereas specifically focusing on Atlassian is something that I really love doing. So that's when we kind of pivoted, and I started focusing exclusively on Atlassian tools, helping companies with pretty much Atlassian everything.
I wanted to ask then, so we got our company, we know we don't want to do the MSP stuff. How do you actively find clients, and like how do you stay fed?
These days, word of mouth, probably for the most part. There's a few clients that I've been working with for a couple of years now that just have really big needs. Some of them are enterprise level, so they oftentimes have recurring things that come up that just consistently need fixing or new implementation that they need. Um, in some cases, is just kind of outreach and just seeing if someone has a need. Reaching out to a company that might be using Atlassian or that might have a need for that kind of assistance or work. Oftentimes, I would just give them some kind of a free consultation or just work with them and see what I could provide to them, completely no strings attached. And then if they like the process, if they like the result, then we kind of move forward with an official Jira service or Atlassian service. But these days, it's probably mostly just word of mouth.
Okay. And do you find having the AC, do you have ACPs under your
I do
belt?
not. I don't have
So do
any.
you, so let's talk about that for a second, because I don't, I mean, I have one, but I was kind of peer pressured into it. But do you feel that that's an advantage, disadvantage? What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's a disadvantage. So I've tried twice. I both times I was
Are
like
you a
two
horrible test
questions
taker like
away.
me? Because I hate taking tests.
I'm terrible at tests. So yeah, I'm terrible at like sitting down and studying. I'm really more of the I need to get my hands into it in the real world use case. Like find a client, find the solution, and then I'll be able to learn it. Which I've done very well with the Atlassian space, but being able to study and the exams are very tricky and like scenario based, so they kind of get you there. But both times that I've attempted it, I was just like one or two questions away from actually getting it.
Getting,
Yeah,
you,
so
you should have done what I did. I walked into the ACP 520 and I was like, I need 39 questions out of 75. 39. I went through, I went through the whole thing, and then once I went through the whole thing, I was like, okay, I answered all 70. So worst case, we're not failing the test because I forgot to answer a question.
that's true.
But then I was like, okay, so I'm gonna go through each one, and if I don't get that warm fuzzy feeling like immediately, like I know it, I just need 39 of these warm fuzzy feelings out of 70. So as soon as I hit 70, I was like, okay, let's submit because I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah, and to answer your question, I think it may be a disadvantage because I think some companies, even like recruiters, if you're looking for a job, I think they're really only looking for those certified individuals. Whereas if you're not certified and they're searching for you, like if you have your certification on LinkedIn, for example, you're going to come up in their results versus not coming up in the results. Um, but ultimately, from like a perspective of someone who understands and works with Atlassian, if I were hiring, I'd rather have someone who actually understood the product, who's done this a thousand times before, than someone who's studied it and never implemented it before. So ultimately, it is a downside, but from a perspective of can you do the Atlassian work? Can you build the Atlassian solution? I think it doesn't matter too much.
Nice. Yeah, and that's kind of the belief, right? Because I think you and I are very much alike, right? Again, I got peer pressured into that 520. Let no one fool you. But I am getting now a tremendous amount of pressure to pursue, right? To get the 120, to get
Mhm.
the 420 and the 620 that I need. And in all my endeavors, right? Not only one person has ever asked me, like, hey, do you have any Atlassian certifications? My answer that I gave him, which I think was very clever and he liked, was there's nothing on that test that's going to help me help your problems. Like help me help you fix your problems, right? And so he's like, good answer. I'll
True.
I'll I'll, I'll bring you on then, right? Um,
Yeah, that's
but
true. I
but a
think
lot of it is confidence.
one of my mistakes was also, taking the 121st because that's one of the much more challenging ones,
Oh,
starting
don't
with,
even
like
say that because that's the next one I'm taking.
that's what I
Take
heard, so
take the 520. The 520 is easy.
okay. I'll have to look into that. If I still wanna do it, I'll have to look into it.
520 is easy. Although, I don't know, so let's kind of pivot a little bit, right? So today, do you I mean, I'm assuming you have enough healthy clients that keep you busy throughout the day?
Yeah, for the most part, it's been pretty healthy. It comes in waves as it usually does. Some months are, they kind of just slow down, and then some months you just don't have time for anything.
Do you ever worry about, like, having a dry month then? Is that something that keeps you up at night?
It used to, I would say probably not anymore. It's gotten a little bit more consistent, thankfully. But before it definitely like worried me a little bit. And I was thinking like if I lose this client or X amount of clients, if once we wrap up these projects, a lot of Atlassian work is project based. It would worry me a little bit, but I think it's been a little bit more consistent. And the longer you do it, the less worry you have because you're not drying out for the past couple of years, so you're probably going to be okay going forward. But it is something that's still kind of in the back of my mind.
That's interesting 'cause I'm only sharing, right, because I feel like we're on very similar paths, and I for the last 2 years, just I can't commit to it because 'cause I'm so scared, right? And so I stick to the YouTube, I stick to making the content, I stick to the training because these are things that I can actively do very
Mhm.
passively, right?
Right.
Like, I can maintain a quote unquote full-time job, let that fulfill me from bills and food and insurance and all that stuff, build out the YouTube aspect of it, right, where I'm getting 100,000 views a month on my channel. And then
Mhm.
YouTube, of course, through AdSense and sponsorships brings me a decent amount of money to live off of. But that middle ground of that consultancy, really, that's the part that I struggle with the most because it's like, what happens if nobody shows up that day?
Yep. Well, from someone who has an audience, isn't that like a huge benefit of you kind of have if you really wanted to start a consulting company or provide those consulting services, you kind of have so many people that already know you and can work with you. Do you really think that there would ever dry up at some point?
I'll tell you this much: I never advertise. I get,
Mhm.
I make it hard for people to ping me to offer help. Very, very recently, I started being a little bit, like I'm talking like 10% more vocal, where like, hey, I have a membership opportunity, and in that membership, part of your perks is like I'll sit with you for an hour, or you
Mhm.
can just buy like some time a la carte. But I try to not touch that space yet because I'm physically and mentally not ready to do it. Now,
Mhm.
I would suspect, and I theorize, and I dream that if I were to say I'm going to commit to this 100%, the fact that I have that catalog of videos and that steady stream of audience viewers watching these videos, that they'd be like, "Hey, I need help with Jira. I'm gonna get Alex to do it," right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
I would expect, but I've been too scared to even test the waters and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you have so much trust in the industry compared to someone like me who isn't really out there, doesn't really have a presence. You can charge way more than someone like I can, because if someone's looking for a solution and they come across your video and you've solved their problem once before, they're going to trust you to solve it again, especially if they bring you on for a big project or some kind of a big overhaul of Jira or migration. They're going to be willing to pay you top dollar because they know you, they've seen you, they have your reputation kind of is on the line because of your social presence. Whereas
Right.
someone like me, like, yeah, I can have referrals, I can have some testimonials, but it's just not quite at that scale to where I can, be the number one Jira person, kind of like you are in the industry.
But see, I wouldn't even call myself like number one because there's definitely people that are way, way smarter than me. But I think you're right. Like where I would suspect, again, it's more like unrealized gains because I've
Mhm.
never really had the guts, I guess, to commit 100%. Um, Like,
I think there's two thoughts that run through my mind when you kind of bring that up. Number one is that yeah, you probably have that unrealized gain of if you do start this kind of consultancy business, I guarantee that you'll have so much work you won't even know what to do with it. Um, but number two is you kind of mentioned that you feel like there's smarter people in the industry, but I think that's always the case. I think there's always people who are smarter, better, and more efficient at what they do within your industry. But when you take the opportunity and you put more effort, more time, and just put more work into it, I think you ultimately become the one who is, the number one in the industry because of those things, not necessarily because of the talent or, your knowledge or how smart you are. I think most of it just comes down to how hard you work for it.
but that's kind of where I have my biggest. Maybe this is why deep down, man, this might just turn into Josh's therapy session with Alex, because like these are things that I actively think about like a
Mhm,
lot, right? Like I'm consistently figuring out like what do I want to do, right? Because I know I know what makes me happy. I know Jira makes me happy. I know helping people
mhm,
with Jira problems makes me happy, right? But at the same time, it's like I go from exchanging having a single boss to now just having, I don't know, 50 bosses, right? 40 bosses, 30 bosses. And so it's an interesting dilemma that I'm kind of having an existential crisis internally
mhm.
of trying to determine like, okay, do I even want to help people with their Jira problems in what I'll call an active way, right? Because there is value in helping people do the onesie twosies, right? That just help
Right.
me. I don't know how to I don't know how to do this like workflow thing or whatever, right? But it's very transactional, right? And it's not something that I necessarily want to do.
Mhm. What if you kind of leveraged your position as someone who's in the Jira space and then just had a team who executes on all that consulting side of things?
That, but I don't. That's not something I want to do either because I've also thought
Mhm.
of like, well, I can build a team, right? I can train a team, I can build a team,
Yep.
I can hire a team. But now I'm responsible for a team,
Yep.
and maybe my bar's too high, right? Because like I would have a certain expectation, right? Like if you and I were to probably work together, I think it would be, hey Josh, I know your Jira skills, they're kind of on par with me. Like I would expect you to approach a solution in a similar way versus like an offshore team or something like of that nature. They're just following the requirement,
Mhm.
right?
I see. So I'm curious, why did you kind of start the Jira like videos and I guess creating that content in the space in the first place? Because from my perspective, I would do that to
To
obtain new
grow.
clients, right? To be
Yeah.
able to get my awareness, brand awareness out there. Why would you go into it if that's not something that was your goal?
Because I had imposter syndrome, right? So I did the videos. First of all, I wanted to start a YouTube channel since 2014.
Mm,
And so when I wanted to do it, I was like, well, what do I talk about? So I spent basically all COVID, all the pandemic, 2020, like studying, like, what should I start a YouTube channel on, right? And I was like, well, let's teach people how to do something. and and Jira was something that I was passionate about, not very skilled at. I would say I was good at Jira, but I wasn't the best. Um, and I definitely had no intentions of growing YouTube the way it is today for me. But I literally grew it so that I can just document me learning how to use Jira. That was the only thing. It was
mhm,
like literally like the whole Gary V document versus create, right? It was just me like, I'm gonna master this Jira thing because I'm tired of. I grew up with this horrible imposter syndrome all through college because I got a job right away in college, and then I got another one, and then I got another one, and I was working like three part-time jobs and a full-time school schedule, and it was get a C and maintain three jobs, or get an A and not have a job, and I kind of I guess maybe greed got the better end of me, and I wanted to both, right? I wanted to keep both,
yep,
so my grades in school were very mediocre, right? Like there weren't any. I got a 3.3 or something like that in college or whatever, right? But I was always picked on from a imposter syndrome perspective that I never knew how to do anything, and I never specialized on anything. And so I was like, I want to get really good at something now. It's COVID, it's pandemic, everybody's at home. This
Yep.
this is like the perfect opportune time to just hit record and do something.
Mhm.
So 19 months later, I published my first video.
I'm curious how that was, like, were you super nervous and, like, "No one's gonna watch this," and now you're where you're at now, it's, like, totally crazy?
I knew my mom was gonna watch them. I knew that was I knew that I was gonna have that going for me. I didn't think anybody would find value in them. This would have been my second attempt at a YouTube channel, and the first one I built with my wife. We had one on teaching kids how to program in Scratch.
Mhm.
So I knew there was gonna be like 50 views, 100 views, 200 views tops, but I never thought that I'd get like an award from Atlassian for creating a crap ton of content.
Yeah, that's pretty
And
cool.
so yeah, that part blew my mind. But right now, so going back to the story earlier, of like would I want to drive this traffic to consultancy? That's kind of where I struggle, right? Because YouTube today, when I hit that stop recording in 30 minutes, I will continue to earn money.
Mhm.
During this conversation with you, I continue to earn money. And it's a powerful thing to know that in a few hours when I go to sleep, I will continue to earn money versus being a consultant. I'm only earning money the time that I'm awake and engaging with the client. And so that's kind of where my crisis is like, well, how do I balance these two things, right? Of creating a passive income versus a very, very active, heavy income.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's a really cool benefit of having a channel and just doing what you do and being able to take a month off if you wanted to. That's really cool. You know, when you're working with clients, you're working with projects and deadlines. You don't really have that option many times.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, and so everything I think about today, right, is kind of around that mentality of like, I want to invest in YouTube. And I actually want to build additional YouTube. So right now, the just since it looks like you're curious about this, right? So
I am, yeah.
I'll just I'll just share with you, right? Because I feel like this is definitely a strong assumption, right? But I feel like to a certain degree, I've monopolized like the Jira community. Uh,
Mhm.
18,000 subscribers doesn't feel like a large number, but I get in a 90-day period, I get almost 100,000 unique viewers on the channel, right? It's a lot of people, and it's definitely a lot of people, and I feel like the growth is pretty slow. Like every day I'll get like 20, 30 new subscribers, but it's a consistent 100,000 unique viewers to the channel.
Mhm.
And so when I start thinking of like, okay, so how do I grow this? How do I get this channel bigger? The back of my mind tells me like, well, you got to go beyond just Jira, right? It can't just be Jira. It's got to be something more generic, more mainstream,
Right.
because the people that are looking for Jira at this point, unless you're new, unless you just got hired onto a company, like that's usually where I'm getting my newest audience. Is like, oh, I
Mhm.
just got a job, I got to use Jira. I found your channel, right? But everybody else, my goal 2 years ago was like, any question you have on Jira, my face pops up, and I don't know
It's
if I've
true.
achieved that, but it's pretty popular now.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I'm actually curious, does it ever worry you that you're kind of Jira only or Atlassian only? Like, what if the company kinda ceases to exist in a couple of weeks or whenever, and, does that ever worry you?
It doesn't right now. I thought about it. As I look at my 5, 10, 15-year goal, will that lasting define who I am? Probably not. But the you should see the part that frustrates me the most, right? So I was just on. So I don't know how much you know about me, right? But I'm an Atlassian content creator. So
Mhm.
Atlassian has like a, a special. Are you a community leader by any chance?
I'm not
Okay.
trying, but not yet.
Are you familiar with them though? Like you kind of
Somewhat,
know.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so this concept of a community leader, which have been rebranded to champions. And essentially, there's two types of community leaders, right? There's the online people that answer questions in the Atlassian.community.com,
Mhm.
and then there's the people that host events around the world. Like a local city, like St. Louis has one. I don't know if you've ever made your way out to the St. Louis one. Probably quite the drive.
Mhm.
No, how far are you from St. Louis?
About 3
About
hours.
3 hours. Yeah, I lived in St. Peter's for like 31 months of my life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was in St. Louis for a few years. But yeah, so there's these local chapters, right, where you go and hang out.
Mhm.
And then there was me, kind of like on the side. And through some lobbying and stuff, they're like, oh, let's just create a content creators program. But then they made a requirement that you needed to be a community leader to be a content creator. So there was still me on the side. And so they're like, okay, let's just open it up to just people with an audience. And so that's now they finally let me in. Right. But now that I'm in there, so we have like additional resources that are made available to us. And very recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we met with somebody from Atlassian social media team who runs like paid campaigns on Atlassian's behalf. And they were just telling us about like the influencers that they brought over to the team conference in April. Did you get a chance to go there by the
Yeah,
way?
I was there. We met there. I don't know if you
Okay, that
remember.
where we went. Dude, the whole thing was a blur.
I'm sure.
I met God knows hundreds of people. So nothing personal there. So sorry, apologize. But
No, no, I figured you wouldn't remember.
yeah, no, it was sorry. It was just so many people. I told my wife that very first time, I'm like, I don't know how many babies I kissed and how many hands I shook, but it was a lot today.
I'm sure
But
everybody there knew exactly who you were.
it I think that was like it's easier this way. Like it's a lot of me
Mhm.
giving, but I don't know who any of the people are. It's
Yeah.
that's why I created the Jira Life. I know everybody that follows the Jira Life because it's a community. Have you followed our Jira Life yet?
Yeah, I've seen a few podcasts, yeah.
Highly recommend you. So you can attend live. You should jump in the chat and interact with us because it's a pretty cool community. But
Okay, yeah,
anyways,
I'll jump in.
so we did this whole like social media influencer thing, and what really again it bothered me was Atlassian pays these influencers to be at team. And I'm looking at the two influencers and they have nothing to do with Atlassian,
Mhm,
right? And I'm like, why would Atlassian give thousands of dollars to an individual who has a huge following, 400,000 people, but has nothing to do with their brand? Versus like people that watch my videos, they're here because they love and want to know about Atlassian.
mhm,
And so that's kind of like that moment of realization I had like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was like, apparently I can't be at all about Atlassian because Atlassian doesn't care about all Atlassian. Atlassian cares about how big is your reach.
mhm,
And so that's kind of the moment I decided like after this, as I prepare for the fall, we're going to be looking at branding beyond just Jira and it's more productivity, teamwork,
mhm. That makes
efficiency,
sense.
project
Yeah.
management, that kind of stuff.
I kinda had the same thoughts at Atlassian. Like, it was cool that they invited some, guests there, some influencers, but, yeah, they didn't really have much to do with Atlassian or, anything related to their company at all. So I kinda had the same thought running through my head, when they were, like, presenting and had the keynotes.
And the the best part is that those people are the ones that are like front and center. Where like when Rodney, I'm sure you know the Jira guy, right? He's my partner in crime.
Mhm, yep.
When we post something, like people are listening, right? Like people care about what the Jira guy has to say about Jira,
Mm.
right? And you would think that the Jira guy is like front and center, right there where the press is at. But Atlassian's got some interesting priorities, and we're trying to make changes. At least we got a foot inside, and so it gets a
Mhm.
little bit easier. But still, definitely an uphill battle for us here.
Yeah. What is your community currently like, what kind of people are in your community? Is it mostly the Jira admins, the Jira customers, people who are just interested in Jira?
On my main YouTube channel, I would say that the audience, because it's not even a community on
Mhm,
this main channel that we're recording this for. This is going to be mainly users. I think it's going to be just users of Jira that are looking to like know how to use an epic or know how to plan a sprint, or I should say, learn how to use an epic,
yep.
learn how to plan a sprint, learn how to do more of like the application and utilization of Jira.
Mhm,
That's where the majority of the people are coming here. Those videos tend to resonate the best. Where I'm teaching you how to use Jira as a user. On the Jira Life, that's a community, and that one's an interesting thing because within the Atlassian ecosystem, and even within the Atlassian community leaders, you don't necessarily need to be a Jira admin to be a community leader. So that community is more just people that love Atlassian,
mhm,
whether they use it for work or they work on it. as an admin, like it's still a pretty big mix, but you can at least classify them as like these people are diehard Atlassian aficionados.
Mhm. You mentioned one thing earlier, like you met with some of the marketing people at Atlassian. I had a chance to meet a few Atlassian folk at Team 24 as well. I had a few good conversations, and like from my perspective, I guess I'll give you some background info. I work with a lot of clients. A lot of them use Jira Service Management, Jira Software, Jira Work Management. I know they're combined now, but they're still
Yeah,
technically different tools. But
yeah.
uh,
Until they pull the plug, it's still
yep.
not all. There's still five Juras.
But ultimately, I was there and I talked to a few of them and I expressed some of the concerns and like problems that some of my clients have had. And interestingly enough, there were actually solutions to these problems that they've helped me achieve, over the past couple of weeks that they've implemented for us. One quick example is a company I was working with, enterprise, huge company that was migrating from Asana to Jira Work Management. The biggest thing there was that Jira Work Management doesn't have an advanced forms feature. It's so basic. It's very, very convoluted, but JSM does have it. So I was like, why don't you just bring the functionality of the JSM forms into Jira Work Management? And he's like, "Oh, we have it. We just don't unlock it for every single client or every single customer on the Atlassian platform. It has to be like a manual request. It has to be an enterprise client. They don't do any kind of premium or standard. So it's very exclusive in a way. But what I noticed was, and this was like kind of just one example, was just having a relationship or knowing someone at Atlassian gives you so much of a benefit from like a consulting perspective, just to be able to bring new solutions or solutions that you may have thought never even existed prior to that to their company. So otherwise, we would have had to use some kind of paid plugin, which isn't the most ideal scenario. So just a really cool thing that I noticed was that if you actually know people in Atlassian, especially if you're a consultant, they can really help you out. The problem is it's really hard to actually get to know someone there and have a
Yeah.
relationship with them.
The good thing for enterprises though, as long as they have cash, they can buy their way into that influence because
Mm,
that's what their TAM program is all about, right?
right.
Well, they're I guess they're called advisory services now, but they're technical account managers, right? But you can buy somebody that sits on Atlassian's payroll, and their job is to sit in your meetings and kind of be your voice from your company to Atlassian.
I
Because
see.
I've early on when automation rules were still kind of rolling out, I had a TAM, and I'd be like, "This is the automation rule I'm trying to build, and I can't quite figure it out." And like he's like, "Oh, let me just ping the developer real quick." And the
Yeah,
developer is like,
that's a cool
the
relationship to
developer
have.
that makes the automation rules capability. She's like, "Here's how you do it," and I was like,
Yeah, that's really cool. It would be great to, like, have some kind of I don't know if they have some kind of a program for that or, have, like, a team that works with maybe directly the actual consultants or the partners, the solution partners. I'm sure they have some kind of exclusive access to the Jira folk as well, but, it'd be great to have some kind of relationships with them that helped us in the long run and help them in the long run. Because ultimately, like, they might have that company I was working with might have not even considered moving to Jira if this wasn't a solution that I've provided for them. So I think it's a win-win on both sides.
I think Atlassian is a victim of hyper growth.
Mm,
And what I mean by that, right, is like growth from a user base, from a customer base, but also growth from a employee's perspective, right? Like they are now like a 10,000 plus person company. And just like 3 years ago, they were like a 5,000 person company or 3,000 person company or something like some really small number. Like they grew really exponentially. And I think what's happening, right, is not everybody knows everything. Like not everybody knows the shortcuts and the little back doors and stuff, which is frustrating for the community because Atlassian, on in my opinion, right, if I were to run Atlassian, I would stop the whole enterprise versus premium versus standard, right? Like it's such a I think for me it's poisoning the taste of Jira for me, right? Because now if I want to do anything meaningful in Jira, I have to be on premium. Which I get it, right? Like they're running a business, but you that business is built on your customers, but I guess they're so far vested into Atlassian now that you wouldn't move.
Right. My biggest thing is I don't mind the standard premium enterprise. My biggest thing is that Confluence, Loom, Ops Genie, everything is separate. You want a new product, product discovery, you have to pay more. You have to get a new license. You have to add that into addition to what you're paying for now. It'd be really cool if they bundled that all into one bill that you can pay for them, and then maybe you don't use all the products, but you get all the products if you wanted it. I think Zoho does something similar where they have like 100 tools, and you could pay $100 a month, and you get everything in their suite. That'd be really cool if Atlassian rolled out a plan like that. I think a lot of people would be interested in that.
So in a couple of hours, I get to talk with Jens Schumacher. I don't know if you've met him or seen him.
No, I haven't.
He's our numbers are somebody's got to sit down and actually pull the record from Atlassian, but he's either employee number 12 or employee number 13
Oh, wow.
at Atlassian. And he was telling me last year of a time where Atlassian used to sell you the upgrades by the feature, right? So if you wanted the new board capability, you'd buy, you'd pay some money and get boards enabled on your Jira because apparently boards were not a thing at the very beginning of Jira 1.0, right? Like they came out later in
Mhm.
life. But basically, like if you wanted to add features, you can just pay a fee as opposed to paying like a per user fee. So I think it's an interesting thing to see what Atlassian's thinking long term. I don't think that they would change anything right now because right now they're really quadrupling down on this model of like you pay to use anything in Jira now. Like
Yep.
I'm just counting on the days where they like charge us every time we hit that create issue button. If you want to create a story,
Those microtransactions.
yeah, 10 cents. 10 cents. But like we say jokingly, we laugh, but I'm fearful for that because I can see it on a roadmap somewhere.
Well, they do it
And
with automation technically once you hit your
right,
limit,
but that
right?
wasn't the way. It wasn't that way before, but they brought it in. But I can see them doing that, and I'm kind of low key very scared for when that
Yeah.
day.
I guess that could be a good and a bad thing. If you're a small company and you get all the features, but you're very low issue count, you're happy. But if you're an enterprise company with so many issues coming in, new created, from all your customers, you're probably not too happy about that.
Then maybe they need to change up their pricing model then, right? Because like again, an enterprise.
Mhm,
I've also learned this. I don't know how much you know about this, right? But Atlassian's enterprise customers, what they consider to be enterprise, which is I think like 5,000 users or more,
mhm.
they have like their sales department like geared towards them. And then they
Oh,
have like 10% of their sales department for everybody else. It's like a really low number of Atlassians that are responsible for the non-enterprise people.
yeah, that makes sense. Whatever brings them the most money, that's where their focus will be.
But Atlassian, in my opinion, is not an enterprise product yet. The
That's
fact
true
that
too. Yeah.
the fact that you're saying, right, the fact that you're saying like, hey, we got all these Loom and this Confluence and it's all these extra fees and stuff, the integration of them, they don't all talk to each other. Try
Mhm,
using Bitbucket and Jira. That works, but looking at it from an admin perspective,
mhm.
those don't talk to each other. I can't tell you how many times people email me like, "Hey, Alex, I need access to Bitbucket." I'm like, "Good luck. I'm not the admin."
Yeah, yeah, the worst for me, and I know that they're fixing this finally, but, the billing issue. So you have Loom separately. For some reason, Bitbucket is still separate, but then Confluence and Jira, Opsgenie, those are integrated finally. But they're finally, I think, fixing that, and they realize that that's an issue, and they're gonna unify all the administrative and billing stuff under one roof.
Be a much welcome change, but I'm pretty sure they're unifying it first for enterprise, and then
Yeah,
standard and premium.
probably.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, like I said, Atlassian. I was talking to Mark Kruth about this a little bit. I don't know if you know Mark Kruth. He's
Yeah,
from Atlassian,
I went to a few of his
and
talks at Team
yeah,
24.
yeah. And so I was talking to him yesterday, and I was like, at what point did we take the fun away and we just made this about a business, running a business? He just starts laughing because like Atlassian used to be fun. It used to represent like this, like almost like I imagine Apple in 1984 when they were
Mhm.
trying to fight IBM, right? But maybe it's the laws of nature that you eventually become IBM.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Because even Apple today is I everything that they fought against in 1984.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Hmm, I haven't thought about that.
Poor Josh. Josh is like, I did not come to have this deep of a meaningful conversation. I thought we were going to talk about workflows and how many statuses the workflow should have.
Yeah.
Oh man, but yeah, it's an interesting perspective. What about you? Like, what are your deep thoughts about last week?
I have like a list of things that not a literal list, but like in my head, every time I come across something, I'm like, man, why don't they fix this? Like, why don't they fix this? Like, this is something that a developer can take 2 hours and fix, like super easy, super quick. Um, I mean, I think you're right about that. When you're growing so fast, when you're such an enterprise company, I think you start to struggle with kind of understanding your customer and being able to actually implement the changes that matter, that are needed. And you're really implementing the features that draw the enterprise customers to you rather than the customers that you have now that are complaining about the small little things that need to be tweaked or fixed. One example is like they just fixed this too, but the way that in work management you couldn't change the tabs, you couldn't set a default view. That was like a huge complaint from so many clients that I've worked with. Because every time, you have 10 projects in work management, each one of them you want a separate view. Each one of them you want, to clean up the view a little bit. Every time you click on a project, that's a couple of extra clicks for you just to get to the view that you want. Stack that up over a day, over a week, over a month, you're losing a pretty good amount of time just by clicking on things that you didn't really need to click on. They finally fixed that like literally a month or so ago, but for years it was a problem. And a patch like that, some simple feature like that is not a lot of work to develop and implement. But there's a lot of little things like that that I come across that my clients come across for their use case. So it would be like tremendously helpful, and I know that would be really helpful for a lot of other people in the community. Even when I like look up like, hey, is this possible in Atlassian? There's so many features requests that you come across that have been sitting there for years that Atlassian just doesn't really act on, which I think is a bummer, but it makes sense from their perspective. And ultimately, the tool still does work for the most part. But just having someone that might be looking at that a little bit more consistently and developing those really good features that the Atlassian community is asking for would be really, really great from them.
Maybe I'll have you join my coalition of people that we're banding together to build a new Jira.
Sign me up.
Sign you up. Yeah. I want to ask you a couple more questions here, maybe a little bit deeper. Going back to grid, the thoughts on at one point, I'm assuming you've had one of two thoughts, which is should I become a solution partner or should I join a solution partner?
I've worked with a solution partner, a couple of them actually. I've actually worked with a lot of app developers, a lot of solutions partners, a lot of people in the industry within the Atlassian space. I'm actually on primarily on Upwork. That's kind of where I got my start. So I think a lot of people kind of found me through there. Some solutions partners, some app developers. So I kind of got my foot in the door to a lot of them. I enjoy working with them. I enjoy, working with the solutions partner and the enterprise clients that you get. I'd love to become a solutions partner, but it's obviously a bit of a different scale where you have to have a team, you have to have certifications. So that might be a next step for Grid.io and where we're headed. But as of right now, we're just kind of a small consulting company that helps you with anything Jira.
Nice. And so, do you plan like what's your long term goal then? Like, where do you see this going?
Ultimately, I want to build a company that is number one, just focused on quality of services. So I want our clients, our customers that work with us to feel like they're getting the best service possible. So that's like our number one goal above anything else. In some cases, that means doing things that may not benefit our company, which I'm totally fine with because if you provide something of value to a customer or client, they're way more inclined to number one talk about you, number one or number two to come back to you, and they're always going to leave you a good review and be satisfied with their service. So I think in the long term that benefits you as a company, you as a person. You feel like you've actually helped someone and impacted their company in a good way. But long term, we want to build a company that is just going to help you with anything Atlassian. I think just like you mentioned with your content creation, just getting that audience on YouTube and maybe even converting that to some of your consulting business is maybe in the plans as well. So I think long term, we just want to grow. We want to be able to add more people to our team, and specialize a little bit more in each Atlassian product because I'm very well versed in Jira and Confluence, but maybe having someone who's very well versed in like the Bitbucket side of things, the agile methodology. That way, when a client comes to us and they may be enterprise, they're looking for all these solutions, and we could provide the best possible consulting, the solution for them with all under one roof, essentially.
Yeah, it's a really good point because one thing that I didn't really get to mention, right, is like if and when I do consider consulting, I want to kind of consider it from a big bang approach, right? Like a 50,000 plus, 100,000 plus type of contract, right? Because then that to me would be lucrative because then at that point it's less about like being counting the hours and more of like, hey, what do you want? And if you want a full-fledged Jira with your Confluence hooked up, connected to your Bitbucket, and like all your team knows how to use Bitbucket and they know how to do their peer reviews and the whole pipelines and everything set up, like cool, here's 50 grand, we'll get it done in a month, and that's it.
Mhm.
Like that's the bill, right? Like
Yep.
I hate the whole like it's gonna take me 30 hours to do this and 22 hours to do that and 7 hours here and you gotta send the per hour type of thing. So that's kind of what
Yeah,
I would
I'm
like to get to.
I'm not a proponent of that as well. I actually don't do any hourly work. I don't like to for a number of reasons. Number one, you're kind of valuing my time and my experience to a number, like a number that I would provide you with. Why not just value my experience to what it's actually worth? So instead of
Right.
paying me, $100 an hour, $200 an hour, whatever that number is, what is what are you willing to pay for the solution that's going to work for you? You could go get it for cheaper, like that's totally your option, but what are you going to pay for a solution that's going to, number one, get built really quickly, and number two, work very well for your company?
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I've seen that in a few places where, yeah, it's like, and then maybe that's where the bitterness of the consultancy falls into place, right? Because at the end of the day, you're just exchanging your time for money,
Yep.
and having your hour tied to that rate, like it really does make you feel a certain way versus
Right.
maybe maybe I need 30 minutes to do something, but why punish me for it taking me 30 minutes to fix your problem that you've been Googling for the last week?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And I mean, you're kind of incentivized to work slower in a way as well because you're getting paid per hour. The more hours you take, the more money you make.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe we gotta change the stigma behind consultancy. Maybe it's something I want to address a little bit more aggressively. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about it though, but this conversation has been very helpful with helping
You
me.
should do it. I know for 100% that you'd be like super successful at it, and you'd have more than enough clients than you knew what to do with.
I have a buddy from college. He's been on my case to he does like a talent. He has a talent agency based out of the Philippines, and he's like, Alex, I'll find you the Jira admins. You pay them. It's like $20 for the most experienced Jira admin an
Mhm.
hour. And so going back to your example, 100, $200 an hour, and someone from the Philippines doing the work, like it's enticing to me. But the part that I still the dot that I can't connect is like, how do I get the job?
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, 1 to $200 an hour, I think that's on the lower end for your admin. I think for someone with your reputation, you could be above that quite a bit.
Yeah, I know a lot of like the solution partners are usually in like the 250 plus
Yep.
area, and I'm like, man, I don't know.
What do they
Sure.
have on Alex, though? I mean, Alex is way more well known, right?
That's where I'm working through it right now. I think I was talking to Chris Cook. Are you familiar with Chris Cook?
I'm not.
So Chris Cook, are you familiar with Custom Charts for Jira?
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so he's a founder.
I use their tool almost on every instance, actually.
He's a founder of Custom Charts.
Oh,
Or
okay.
was before he sold it. Now he bought
Uh,
an island and retired. He sold his app to Tempo last April.
oh, nice.
And so yeah, so he made out like a bandit recently, and he's just like, I heard he bought a beachfront house in Thailand. True story. And a
That's
bar
not bad.
and a comedy club. But anyways, so Chris and I were talking. Ooh, I want to say maybe like November of last year, and he's like, actually no, September, because Ronnie quit his job at Activision. I don't know if you heard.
No, I
Yeah,
didn't.
he used to work at Activision Blizzard, and he quit
Mhm.
because there was a conflict of interest with him and his activities as a influencer and his responsibilities as a Jira admin for a publicly traded company. When he quit, Chris Cook, who has a wad of cash just burning in his pocket from his cell, right, as he's like in the middle of negotiating his beachfront property, he's like, Alex and Rodney, let's build something together. And he's like, well, what do you have in mind? Like, let's just do a consulting company, right? I'm like, cool. I wouldn't mind doing it, especially Big Chris is head of marketing here. Like, he knows how to market the heck out of anything.
Mhm.
And I was like, how much you thinking we should charge? Guess what number he tells me?
500?
1,000 an hour.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, Chris, who the heck's gonna pay $1,000 an hour? He's like $1,000 an hour, and you get the Jira guy and Dr. Jira to fix your Jira problems. Like,
That's pretty compelling.
yeah, he's like, I'd pay $1,000 an hour to have the two leading experts in Jira fix my problems.
That's very true.
But Rodney chickened out and he got a
Oh,
job. He got a regular job, and Rodney and
well, hey,
he,
if the partnership is still open, I'm all ears for, an
we're
idea
all
like
ears.
that.
I'll keep you in mind because I would like to build something. I'd like to build something long term, but right now I'm working through some stuff this summer.
Mhm.
But I'm telling people Labor Day, when we conclude the summer of Atlassian, expect some major announcements coming out here. So we'll
Oh,
we'll
that's
definitely
cool.
keep this friendship open here, Josh.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear those announcements.
Yeah. Well, Josh, I know we're at the top of the hour, so I want to be very mindful of your time. So thank you so much for jumping on with me and chatting, and thanks for saying hi, and then thanks for signing up. I think it takes a tremendous amount of courage because it's not something I would do if the roles were reversed. I definitely wouldn't have put my hand up. so
Well,
so
thank you
thank
for
you for
having me. It's been
yeah.
an honor, and I enjoyed
Great
this
writing and
conversation.
good luck on your podcast. Send them over to me on LinkedIn. I'll make sure to include them in the description. And
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. It's,
do
it's
whatever
called the
information.
Atlassian Everything Podcast, so, maybe we could have you on a guest at some point.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, send me everything and I'll put it in the description and I'll let you know when this video gets published.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Alex.